Hello guys, and welcome to another Witch Doctor build video for patch 2.2, and today we are covering the SMK Jeram fetish build. This build is probably the second most effective out of the 3 top builds at the moment for this patch, the first being the Carnival Poison Dart build, and the third being the Tiki Lockdown build. But all 3 builds having their own advantage. For example, the Carnival build having the highest fishing potential, meaning it can climb the highest at the cost of being the most inconsistent, whereas the Tiki Lockdown build is the most consistent of the top 3 builds, but very limited to how far it can climb, as opposed to say this build, which I'd say is somewhere in the middle of the 2. I've been able to go fairly far with this build. However, there are some issues you might want to be aware of, such as the fact the build requires you to use Tasker and Theo gloves in order to be effective. This means you must be wearing both a Royal Ring of Grandeur and a Zuni ring to complete the set, which means you have no space for a Unity ring on you or your follower, thus making the build somewhat of a glass cannon in comparison to say the Carnival build, which can benefit from a Unity ring. However, it's still a very strong build, so let's get into what you'll need to make it work. The first thing you'll need is a SMK or Star Mantle Curie. This is somewhat the key to the build, as it will effectively let you spam Big Bad Voodoo and resummon your fetishes at will. Now, my SMK isn't ancient and it rolled pretty terribly, yet it has allowed me to remain competitive on the leaderboards. So if you manage to get an ancient version of this weapon, you can expect to do very well with it, provided you have the rest of the gear required. For the SMK, you will ideally want a decent damage roll with 10% damage, critical hit damage or attack speed, and of course a socket which can be attached afterwards should you need to reroll a default socket for one of these stats. For the helm, you will be needing the second key item to the build, and that is of course the Mask of Jeram, as this is a pet build and this helm will double the amount of damage that your pets do. You will want your Jeram to roll Intellect, Vit, Crit and the socket. You will then need the Tasker and Theo gloves. As mentioned before, increasing your pet's attack speed is very important, not only for damage, but it is vital due to the fact your SMK proc works based around your fetishes doing damage. So the faster they attack, the faster you will be able to summon your Big Bad Voodoo and fetishes. You will ideally want Int, Crit, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, sorry, attack speed. We will then want 5 pieces of Zuni coming from your chest, legs, feet, mojo and ring. For your chest, you will want Int, Vit, 3 sockets and fetish army damage. For your legs, you will want Int, Vit, armor and 2 sockets. For your feet, you will want Int, Vit, armor and resistance, and for your mojo, you will want Int, Vit, crit and elite damage. The new mojo will now always roll fetish army damage by default, so you will obviously be keeping that on there. For your rings, you will want Int, either crit and or crit damage, a socket for your legendary gems, which I will get into in a moment. For your belt, ideally you will have a Belt of Transcendence. This will allow you to summon fetish sycophants, freeing up a slot for your passives, which we will also get into in a moment. For our shoulders and braces, we are using a 2-piece or 3 pieces with the Royal Ring of Grandeur all killed set for the extra defense and damage against elites, and for those you will ideally want Int, Vit, armor and fetish army damage on your shoulders, and for your braces you will want Int, Vit, crit chance and physical damage, as the main damage source will be from our pets doing physical damage. And finally, for our neck, we will ideally have a Hellfire amulet. However, all mine rolled shit, so I'm using a very nice Black Thorns amulet, which gives me 7% melee damage reduction. For the amulet, you will want Ink Crit, crit damage and a socket. For our legendary gems, we are using Pain Enhancer, as each fetish can trigger the effect, as well as the extra attack speed we get from it. We are taking Enforcer for the extra pet damage. We are also taking a Bayonetta Trap for the raw damage increase. For our abilities then, we are taking Haunt with Poison Spirit, as we will be spamming this alongside Zombie Piranhas, both of which will be triggering the new Zuni 6-piece every time they hit. The benefit of Zombie Piranhas being, as well as the 15% damage debuff, it can jump from enemy to enemy, making it kind of a ranged ability, triggering the effect, which is awesome, especially if you are running Grave Injustice, which will allow you to spam a few pulls before the effect of one ends, hitting pretty much everything in the room. We will of course be needing the Bad Voodoo with Slam Dance and Fetish Army with Legion of Daggers, as these will also be spammed constantly as your fetishes do damage to the target due to the proc from your SMK. And we will also be taking Spirit Walk with Jaunt, which is a given for any build, as well as the new Hex Jinx, which can now AoE immobilize, as well as adding a 20% damage debuff to all that are hexed. It can even hex Rift Guardians if they are standing next to smaller enemies when the hex triggers, which is pretty fucking sick. So I suggest taking hex if you're not sure what to take for this slot on any build really. So for our passives then, we are taking Rush of Essence so that we can spam Haunt and Piranhas without running out of mana. We're taking Pierce the Veil and Spirit Vessel, obviously, which are the staple of any game, any build, end game, Greater Rift setups. And finally, this one is completely up to you. You probably want to take either Graven Justice or Gruesome Feast. Now, as I said before, ideally you will have a Hellfire Amulet that will allow you to run both of these. But if, like me, you don't have one, then personally I like GI because I feel it synergizes better with this build, being that it's a very close range melee build. So it's a bit more consistent than, say, Gruesome Feast, which can effectively double your DPS, but it doesn't do shit to help you during moments of downtime when there are no globes around. So tips on how to play the build then, it's literally just a case of managing your cooldowns and remembering how they work. For example, your fetishes won't be doing optimal damage to enemies unless they've recently been struck by one of your mana spenders, because it's a Zuni 6-piece. So make sure whenever your pets are clustered in a specific area, that is where you are spamming your Piranhas and Haunts. Remember that your pet's attack speed will increase if they are standing in your Big Bad Voodoo, but their damage will not increase unless you are standing in it, raising your own sheet damage and thus theirs. So always make sure you are standing in it before them, but with the amount of time it takes for Big Bad Voodoo to come off cooldown, you should be able to keep everyone covered. What else? I'd say remember to use your hex as much as possible, but you need to be aware that it has a close proximity, and that proximity is around you. It follows you kind of like a pet when summoned, so in some cases you might want to spirit walk into a load of enemies, drop hex before running back. This is of course risky on very high level Greater Rifts, as you do not want to waste your spirit walk unless absolutely necessary. Okay, well, that's the build, guys. If you like the video, please give it a like, and if you're not subscribed, please consider doing so for more Diablo content and more. Okay guys, have fun, take care.